Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I've got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Tudor watch's Black Bay 58. And this is the blue variant of the watch, and an absolutely beautiful little piece. But first off, I want to thank my buddies over at Lewis Jewelers in Ann Arbor, Michigan for sending this guy along. They are my AD for Tudor, as well as for a bunch of other things, Omega, Breitling, Tag, Seiko, etc. They've been great to me and can be great to you. Call my buddy DK over there, tell him Nick Shabazz sent you. He can help you find the Tudor you want and help you out with, like I said, a whole bunch of other brands as well. So thanks for Lewis Jewelers for loading this guy my way to take a look. Next thing, let's do a little bit of size measurement on this guy. What we see here is that this is actually a reasonably small watch. If we do the overall dimension here, without the crown, we're looking at about 38. With the crown, we're looking at about 42. The lug-to-lug distance, which is maybe the most important factor for wearability on a watch, is about 47. The thickness on it is a refreshing 11.9 millimeters, which is amazing, and the actual width of the crystal itself is about 30.8. And then the lug width on this guy for putting on a strap is at 20 millimeters, which is still quite reasonable. And then actually I want to do a couple of quick size comparisons for you with this little guy. I mean, to start with, let's look at it against its big brother. This is also on loan from Lewis Jewelers, by the way. This is the Tudor Black Bay Bronze. And what we see here is that these watches are very, very different in terms of size. The Black Bay Bronze, given, is a slightly larger version, but oh boy. So the 58 here is a much more reasonably sized watch. And then I'll put it up against my very favorite dive watch. That is the Omega Seamaster. The professional 300, and what we see here is that this is a smaller watch still. That is the Tudor is. So there you go. Next thing, this is a quick review. This guy was sent to me for a couple of days. I got a chance to check it out in the metal, so to speak. See, check out the performance, etc. But the thing is, this is going to be a quick review, and as you can see, there are still bits of protective plastic on there, and out of respect for the future owner of this piece, I definitely don't want to take those guys off. So there's that. Then finally, this is the blue variant with the blue bezel as well as a blue face. There is a version that is all in black with a red triangle and a gilt dial. That means it's got a little gold accents, not that it feels bad about things. But either way, this is the Black Bay 58 blue variant. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little watch right here. So on the good side, to start with, one of the things that's kind of weird about this watch, but I kind of appreciate, is the crown. Not that the crown is so unique. I mean, it's pretty. It's got nice, you can see here, they put the little Tudor mark on there. That's good, but it just has an incredibly strong feeling crown. Like, the winding stem is very thick here, and when you pull this out, I mean, you can see here, this is beefy, and so even when I'm changing the time here, this has a very, very strong, completely play-free crown, which if you're just coming off of Vostok or something like that, you're probably going to appreciate, but that's a very nice little detail, and I appreciate it. Next thing, this guy has 200 meters worth of water resistance. As you might expect from something with Bay in the name, it better be freaking waterproof, but 200 meters is waterproof to the extent that you really just don't have to think about water anymore. And that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, the bracelet on this guy is interesting. This has riveted style links. I know you got to find this part of the review riveting, but basically instead of having sort of a more conventional approach, like the Omega, which either has the screws or nothing at all, you end up with these little rivets in there. And so you can see here that some of them are rivets, some of them are screws for removable links there. But it's interesting. And the clasp on this guy is very Rolexy, with a little ceramic ball bearing in there in both, areas, so that it pops together with actually relatively little force. But this crown guard on there, or not crown guard, this clasp guard here means that this isn't coming off your wrist unless you want it to. So the clasp does have some very luxurious elements, which I appreciate. Next thing, crystal on this guy is sapphire, as is expected at this kind of price point, which is good. It's going to be a little bit more scratch resistant than a lot of your mineral sorts of crystals. That's nice. Next thing, finishing-wise, good to go. Again, there is still a little bit of plastic on this guy, so some of the case polishing is going to look nicer, but we see here that we have very crisp edges on the case. We get a little bit of polishing here. We get some polishing on the sides of the bracelet links here, which is nice, and actually it is a very good quality polish over there, which is good. You get very nice brushed finishes in here. You get some nice little details. You get the extra lines. I'm pretty impressed overall with the quality of the finishing on this guy. It's not the fanciest prettiest feeling piece ever, but it is definitely full of nice little touches that make me feel like, wow, this is pretty excellent. So that's good. Next thing, this guy has a very nice movement. The movement in this guy, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the back of the case where you would be able to see the movement, is the Tudor in-house movement MT5402. This is a movement that is unique to the Black Bay 58. They made a movement that's reasonably sized for a change. That's great. But it is a mechanical watch movement, as you can see by the fact that the hand is ticking along much faster than once a second. And it has, so that means that everything is done in here without batteries. It's all just springs and gears and such. But it has a 28,800 beat rate. That's beats per hour. It has hacking seconds, which means that if I untwist the crown here, which, by the way, screw down crown, as you might expect. If I untwist the crown, pull it out, you can see the second hand has stopped. This allows you to set the time precisely, which is good. It is using a silicone balance spring to reduce magnetism's effects, which is good. Means this watch is going to be much harder to accidentally magnetize. It is a chronometer-rated watch, which means they are putting their money where their mouth is and guaranteeing a very good runtime, very good running accuracy for this guy, which is definitely something you want to see anytime you look at over about, $500-600. And then it has a 70-hour power reserve. That means you take this guy off your wrist, it will run for 70 full hours. That is actually impressive. I appreciate that power reserve very, very much. And it makes the watch just feel a lot, that kind of a power reserve is great, especially if you're a collector and you've got multiple pieces in your collection. It means that at any given moment, one of them is going to be running well, right? And you don't have to reset the time every time. So the movement in this guy is absolutely great. And this is an area where Tudor, by the way, in case you're not familiar, Tudor is actually Rolex. It's a Rolex brand. It's under the same general company. In fact, this is where Rolex feels like they're doing a lot of their innovation lately. But nonetheless, so Rolex has had a heavy hand in designing this movement, and it definitely it shows. Then finally, on the good side, this is a super legible watch. What I mean by that is this has the Tudor-style snowflake hands, which I will show you by changing the time so you can see all the hands. But nonetheless, it has the snowflake-style hands, which are really nice just for overall legibility. This is I can read it across the room thing, but it also has great lume. I'm going to charge it off camera here with a very powerful flashlight, and what we see here is... oh, yeah, that's luminous. The lume on this is good. This is very, very good lume. And as a result, this becomes very, very easily readable day or nighttime, with a very clear demarcation of the 12 o'clock marker, which is a beautiful thing, as well as a lumed pip in the bezel there, which is worth pointing out for those deep dives. Those deep dives. Yes, because somebody has ever dived with a dive watch. I know some people do, but that's not what they're for. Anyways, I digress. But it is a super legible watch with a really, really nice, easily readable face. So to me, all of that is the good. It's that it's legible, it's got a great movement, nice finishing, sapphire crystal, an interesting bracelet, 200 meters worth of water resistance, and a very strong and beefy feeling crown. On the great side, to me, is the size. Wow, a modern Tudor that isn't that huge. I mean, seriously. The Black Bay is a beautiful design. Here again is the Black Bay bronze, but the problem with the Black Bay is it's got this big old battleship-style tall-sided effect going on, and they all have had that. When they came out with this, it was like, oh, that's going to sell about a bazillion of them. Because this is the very first Tudor I have worn and felt that has felt like it really fits my 6.75-inch wrist. Obviously, the bracelet isn't sized to me, but at the same time, yeah, that's looking pretty reasonable here. Oh, that's the wrong direction. There we go. What we see here is this wears quite acceptably on the wrist. No real objections there. So, and actually, that's making it look a lot bigger than it is because it's kind of a fisheye sort of effect. But still, this wears quite comfortably. I feel like this is going to be a watch that a lot of people can rock. In many ways, this feels like it is a modern equivalent of the vintage Submariner size. The Tudor Submariner was a thing, by the way, but just generally speaking, a lot of vintage watches have more acceptable sizes in this 39, 40 range. 40 used to be big for a watch, right? And so I feel like this should be the size. And it's not perfect for everybody, certainly. If you've got big old wrists, then by God, you're probably going to go with a full-size Black Bay. But at the same time, in a world where this kind of size isn't usually an option, this is a really stellar choice. So to me at least, what's great here is the size. This is an absolutely wearable watch that you will forget is on your wrist, and that's a beautiful thing that a lot of modern watchmakers seem to have forgotten can be a thing. On the bad side, we'll start off with the neutral, and that is the price. Look, the price on this is not cheap. This is a $3,700 watch. That's a good chunk of change. It's $33.75 if you buy it on a strap, but again, bracelets are often a beautiful thing. I feel like this price is certainly up there. It's a very, very luxury watch kind of price, but at the same time, it feels relatively reasonable relative to one to the other market, right? Because it is substantially cheaper than the Omega Seamaster, which is coming in around $5,200, given it's a couple of levels of fancy dialed up there. But still, this is competing a little bit more in the low to mid-range of the luxury watch end. And that's right, $3,700 is low range in luxury watches. Do not get into watches. But, this is a price that I feel like is quite reasonable. This feels like it's pretty on point, and particularly if you've got a good relationship with an AD who can cut you a little bit of slack, it could get even better. So I like seeing this price, and I really, although I hope it doesn't ever go up, it's good to see a price that doesn't need to go down. So that's good. Next thing, Black Bay 58 is the name of this guy. No, this is the Black Bay 39. I'm sorry. It is really, really confusing. I know that they are referencing 1958, which is the vintage dive watch, era that they are calling back to with this guy. But it doesn't make sense to call something the 58 when its size is 39. The 58 sounds like it should be bigger rather than smaller. Guys, this is ambiguous, right? Call it the Black Bay 1958, sure. But no. No. That's a nitpick, but it's driving me a little bit nuts. Next thing, this has no date on it. This is something that's going to be bothering some people, but actually, you know what, as I've gotten more and more, if I've gotten more and more mechanical watches, that actually bothers me a little bit less, because it's one less thing to reset when you put a watch on your wrist that hasn't run for a little while, right? But, so it could be a little bit of a demerit for your only watch, but it is something to keep in mind. That's a feature you're losing relative to a lot of other watches that have the date on there. Next thing, this guy has a closed case back, meaning that in the back here all you see is steel, and given that's certainly Spartan, it's certainly traditional, but there is definitely a benefit to seeing the actual workings of your watch running inside of there. So that's something that I think is a joy of mechanical watches, and it disappoints me a little bit to see that missing here. Next thing, in the metal, I gotta say the blue version feels a little bit less luxury, right? The black with the gilt accents looks really, really nice. It's subtle, but it's got a little touch of bling there. This feels a lot more like the Pelagos in the sense of a no-nonsense tooly sort of thing. It's just sized properly, and God, if they made do this in titanium with the Pelagos clasp, I want to. But I think personally I would probably end up going with the black, but that's because I have a thing for black watches, and B, I feel like this really, I don't know, I want my fancy watches to be just a little fancier. Not a big deal, and this is a matter of taste, absolutely, but it's a thing. Getting into slightly more objectively problematic stuff, the bezel on this guy is aluminum, and mind you, the aluminum bezels have been the standard for roughly ever. Right? But what this does mean is it's going to scratch up a lot more readily than the kinds of ceramic bezels that you're more often finding on higher-end pieces these days. And so, keep that in mind. And speaking of the bezel action is okay. It's not amazing. This is a bezel, and it is, it doesn't go backwards. But even relative to the Black Bay Bronze, which has a very nice bezel feel, this is okay. It's kind of middle of the pack. In terms of crispness of feeling, etc. You can see there's a little bit of play back and forth there. Is it the end of the world? No, but I'm not a huge fan of the bezel action here. Then finally, on the bad side, the crystal on this guy sticks way up. And for some people, I know people, oh my God, that's a box crystal, that's a feature. Look, I get it. Some folks love that, but to me, it actually feels a little bit more like a vulnerability, because the crystal is sticking up here, and it makes it easier to whack that crystal against something, as opposed to if the crystal is sort of nested down in there, it's much harder to do that. You end up hitting metal more likely than hitting the sapphire directly. Not the end of the world, certainly, and in the grand scheme of things, if you're hitting it that hard that you shatter the crystal, you got other problems too, but that's not something I personally love, and so to me, all that's the bad is that the exposed crystal edges are a little bit of a vulnerability. The bezel action isn't great. The aluminum bezel, feels a little bit old school, but again, the price, okay, I guess. In the metal, the blue feels a little bit less luxury and a little bit more tool watch. That could be a bad thing, could be a good thing, could be an ugly thing, I don't know. It's got a closed case back. There is no date on this particular watch. The Black Bay 58 is misnamed, and the price is okay. It's not super value, but it's also pretty reasonable in the luxury watch world. The ugly front. The only thing that I would consider ugly, and some folks are going to call this bad, but at this point, it is 2020, people. And for better or for worse, it's 2020, and we need to be doing better in terms of bracelets. The bracelet design has changed since 1958, and there are some major features that we have come to expect and should expect these days. One of which is half links. That is a link that is half the size of the original. What this allows you to do is to size the watch with much finer grain, right? And especially if you get two half links and they add up to a little bit more than half, that allows you to put this bracelet at exactly the right size so that you are right in the middle of the quick adjust range. So as a result, sometimes half links are the difference between a watch fitting you and a watch really not fitting you or having to be worn loose. So I don't like that. I think that's absolutely something they need to be including. But even more so, even more problematic is the lack of a toolless quick adjust. This has conventional quick adjust, which means you need a little tool like a watch spring bar tool or something along those lines. You need a little tool to be able to get in there and poke this out in order to make the bracelet a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. If you're just out and about and your wrist swells up, then, well, that's not exactly going to be a thing you can do, right? I'm not a big fan of that. And especially given that Tudor themselves have a really nice quick adjust system on the Pelagos, and given that so many other brands are able to do, like this is an example of a toolless quick adjust from Omega, where you just push this down and it slides out and gives you more bracelet. You push it back in, it gives you a little bit less. This is a really excellent system. And so many companies are now doing this, even on the more budgety end. You get companies like Monta, Christopher Ward, as well as, higher end players. It's getting lazy, guys. I know, but this is Tudor. This is the brand where they're not supposed to be lazy anymore. And by God, that feels like an issue. The other thing I'll point out, by the way, is in this quick adjust clasp, even if you're going with a tooled quick adjust, give us as much adjustability as you can. Why is there not another hole in the back and another hole in the front here? That doesn't make sense to me. I would want all of the range I can get at the very, very least if I'm going to be doing this, just because, especially without half links, this is the only way that you're going to be able to make this watch fit you a little bit better, right? So give me more range. So anyways, to me at least, what's ugly is that Tudor is a company that I know to be in possession of very good toolless quick adjustment capabilities, and yet they've chosen not to implement it here. And they've not even given us half links, which are a really good quality of life feature that make it sometimes a little bit less crucial to have that kind of thing present. So to me at least, it's ugly that they are missing what I feel to be a really important quality of life feature for a watch of any size, luxury or regular, right? So to me at least, that is absolutely ugly. But let's go into the final conclusion. And my final conclusion is that, honestly, that's kind of the blemish here. That's about the problem. This is a watch that is really, really good. It's got a very nice crown. It's got good water resistance, a unique bracelet, sapphire crystal. It's got a really good movement with excellent power reserve, legibility, finishing, and a size that feels like a breath of fresh air. It is absolutely not going to be cheap, although I don't feel like they're ripping my face off either. The name is a little silly. The date might be something you missed there. The blue feels a little less luxurious. The bezel isn't amazing. And the crystal is kind of out in the wind with a bracelet that is a throwback to 1958 in terms of quality of life features too. But honestly, it's good. For me, the biggest piece of news, so to speak, the thing that should put this guy on your radar is exactly that size. I always loved the Black Bay design, but like I said, every time I went to a store, it was just like, nope, we're good, thank you. It's a watch that looks awesome from this angle, and then you notice the third dimension, and like, yay. But this is perfect. This is exactly where it should be, and frankly, I would argue this should be the default size for a wristwatch these days. Offer your models in this, and then have a larger size. Have a 42, have a 43, etc. I long for the days when this was the default watch size, when makers were competing on making movements that were both compact and robust. But in a world where 43 millimeters, that is the norm rather than ridiculous, this is a breath of fresh air. And as a result, this watch is very, very, very close to staying with me. I think I prefer the black and gilt variant when you look in the metal, but that's partly because I'm fancy. And honestly, the biggest thing keeping me from calling DK now and making a deal for one of the black and gold ones is that bracelet thing. Like I said, I've gotten used to beautiful adjustable clasps from all kinds of makers. You know, Omega, Monte, Christopher Ward, even Casio, Tudor. It's just become a thing I've come to love. And so going back to a clasp that has, not only are there no half links here, so I don't have a guaranteed perfect fit, but there's also no quick adjust. That just doesn't wedge open my wallet in the way. You know, I'll be honest though with you. If I wasn't in possession of this Omega here, if this guy didn't already have a home in my collection, this would probably be all the more tempting. Because honestly, the Omega is a little bit big, and if this watch were this size, oh my God, be still my beating heart. But nonetheless, this would probably be much more tempting to me if I didn't already have actually a couple of divers that I love. But this remains an amazing watch. It is probably Tudor's best product right now, because it's going to appeal to a bunch of people who feel left behind by the sizes and the prices coming out of the big Swiss brands. And it offers a damn near complete package, which I think for a lot of people, especially the folks who are a little bit more slight in the wrist department, this could be their one and done sort of watch. So although I'd have to spend a little bit more time to be sure, and absolutely it would be far over the line if they update the bracelet in the second revision, I'm pretty damn sure that this one is a gem. And so if you're looking for a great mechanical watch, and the size and the style of this particular one appeals, then you should absolutely party like it's 1958 and pick one of these little guys up. So there you go. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Lewis Jewelers for letting me check this guy out, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.